What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be giving you my power rankings for the Big Ten Conference after Week 5, a very big, important week in the Big Ten last week. We saw a lot of great, close, competitive games. The last week was just a lot of fun to watch. You'll see next week in my video, my week preview video that I'm actually going to be posting tomorrow because Thursday is Thanksgiving here in the U.S., so I'm not going to be uploading a video then. I'll be uploading my week preview on Wednesday. But today, as I mentioned earlier, is my power ranking video. There was not a whole lot of surprising movement in this week's power rankings. And if it's one thing we can all agree on, it's power rankings, right? Although this week seems to be more concise than others. And we start with a new bottom team in the Big Ten. And it's the only winless team in the Big Ten. And who saw this coming? It's the Penn State Nittany Lions. I mean, this team has just fallen apart at the seams. 0-5. The loss to Iowa last week was, again, another big, embarrassing loss. Penn State just cannot seem to get it together. They could not play a concise game against Iowa. Iowa was able to run all over them. You see next week they get a game against Michigan, which could be an interesting game too, down teams in the Big Ten. Who thought through 5 weeks Purdue and Michigan would be a combined 2-8. It was just unimaginable. You look in terms of yardage, they're pretty good on offense and defense, but scoring is where they lack. They turn the ball over a lot. They can't get into the end zone. I mean, this team is deflated mentally, physically. The only thing that I think would be able to turn this team around is to get a win. And with what they have left, I believe they have Michigan, Rutgers, and Michigan State. So maybe they can turn it around and get a win somewhere, because this Penn State team is too talented to go 0-8 this year, but they're deflated like a team that's going to go 0-8. This Penn State team just does not look great, and therefore they are the bottom team in the Big Ten Conference. Moving up one spot from the bottom spot, where they were last week. They did not play this week. Their game against Maryland got postponed. So the Michigan State Spartans, a familiar place here. They're usually down towards the bottom of the list, and when you look at their stats, you see why. Not a great offense, a pretty okay defense, but again, this offense just turns the ball over way too much. They cannot hold on to the football. This game against Maryland probably wouldn't have been any different than the game against Indiana. You see they have Northwestern coming up, which is going to be a hard one after what Northwestern did in their game against Wisconsin, which I talked about on Sunday. I mean, just this Michigan State team has got to get that turnover situation figured out. If they can do that, I think they can be a solid football team. Not necessarily great, but again, turnovers kill a team, and it's killed Michigan State the most in the Big Ten. That is why they are not higher than number 13. Again, Rutgers just likes this 12th spot. They, again, have not moved after that triple overtime loss to Michigan, 42-48. Now, they do get Purdue next week, which could be a fairly interesting game after the way Purdue lost. But Rutgers finds themselves 1-4, and they're playing better than a 1-4 team. But the record is why they are at number 12. They definitely could have won this game against Michigan, and they did not look bad against teams like Ohio State. Again, they have Purdue coming up this week. When you look at their stats and where they rank in the Big Ten, again, they're not necessarily a terrifically great team, but they're a pretty solid team when you watch them play on film and live on the field. They're a very competitive team. They stick around. They fight to the end. They don't let it go. They fought back to force overtime against Michigan. They just could not close it out. But Rutgers still playing better football than they have in years past, but until I can see them get a win, they're not going to move higher than number 12. Falling 3 spots from last week are the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They fall from 8 to 11 after a terrible performance against Illinois. 5 turnovers in that game in that 18-point loss. And they get Iowa on Black Friday coming up. They find themselves 1-3 with stats not looking the best. They can't seem to score the football. Even when they put Luke McCaffrey at the helm, it worked out pretty well in that Penn State game. But as far as the Illinois game, Illinois just took those turnovers and were able to turn them into points. That's the thing Nebraska does have to work on as well as turnovers. Again, turnovers kill a team. But Nebraska is higher than Rutgers for this reason, and I am going to say this. I just think that Nebraska has the potential to play better football. They've shown that they can play better football than I believe Rutgers can, and it is why Nebraska is here at 11. I would have Nebraska lower, but again, that game against Wisconsin got canceled, so who would have known what happened there? So they have one less loss. I mean, again, this football team is not great, not playing up to a lot of people's expectations, and everyone's trying to give Scott Frost a couple more years to maybe figure things out, but his time might be more limited than we all think. I think they're going to have Scott Frost stick around, but again, this season has just been weird and crazy, and it's not looking good for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who find themselves at number 11. Moving up one spot from number 11 after beating the Cornhuskers are the Illinois Fighting Illini, and they get a hard one next week against the Ohio State Buckeyes. We'll talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes coming up a little bit later, and you see where they ranked with Brandon Peters back. They looked pretty good. They looked healthy with Chase Brown, Mike Epstein, Josh Imatorbhebhe. They looked really good, especially on that defensive side. They were forcing turnovers, and then their offense was capitalizing those turnovers into points. Still, when you look at the statistics among the Big Ten Conference teams, it's not great by any means, but they do find themselves 2-3 after a good close win against Rutgers and then thrashing Nebraska. They're building momentum for this game against Ohio State, so it could be a fairly interesting game to watch. It might be closer than a lot of people think, especially since Ohio State's defense has not been playing at the best lately. They've not been playing like the Ohio State defense they probably should be playing like. But Illinois, again, I said this in the preseason, I would not be surprised if this team could make some major movements in the power rankings. And right now, that is what they are looking towards. I do not expect them to be able to beat Ohio State, but maybe they can make it close and bolster their playing resume just a little bit. But for right now, Illinois is still in the double figures at number 10. Number 9 is the Minnesota Golden Gophers after a win that probably shouldn't have been a win against Purdue. I talked about it on Sunday, but the pass interference call, there was no pass interference. He outstretched the arm a little bit, but there was nothing that really gave him the best advantage to catch that would have been game-winning touchdown. But regardless, in terms of power rankings, a win is a win. They find themselves 2-3, and they have that tiebreaker over Illinois, the absolute beating that Minnesota put on Illinois. And Minnesota finally found their offense again in this game. That is why this game was close. Now, Purdue's kicker was missing field goals. I did mention that on Sunday as well. But they get a tough one next week against Wisconsin. That's going to be a hard one for them to win. They especially need to get their defense going because we saw what Northwestern's defense did against Wisconsin's offense. But again, when you look at their defensive stats, 35 points per game, over 450 yards per game, it's not great. It's what's been killing Minnesota all year. Their offense just needs to score more points than their defense can allow, and that's not how you want to win football games. But again, regardless, a win is a win. Minnesota is out of the double digits. Is out of the double digits just barely. They're at number 9. Number 8, again, moving up one spot just like Minnesota, is the Michigan Wolverines, who get the bottom team in the Big Ten this week in Penn State. After that triple overtime win against Rutgers 48-42, Rutgers was controlling most of that game. Then Michigan was able to come back a little bit before halftime, and then they were able to take over in the overtime periods. Again, this team is still not playing the best football they can. Yes, they do find themselves 2-3 and also have that tiebreaker over Minnesota, which is what I use to help determine power rankings as well. But this team could be playing better. They started Chase McNamara, and they looked good with him at quarterback. So I would expect him to maybe be the starter going forward, maybe have Joe Milton be the backup. But this team is really talented, and if they're not going to do it this year, maybe next year they can be a top 10 team. They might be able to really be competitive in this league. But right now there's just so much going on with this Michigan program. After winning their first game, they dropped 3 straight and now win a close one against Rutgers. I wouldn't feel comfortable with that win if I was a Michigan fan, but they do have tiebreakers, which is why they are at number 8. This team could be playing a lot better football, in my opinion. Now we move into the top half of the Big Ten, and the Purdue Boilermakers drop 2 spots after they fall to 500 on the season after losing against Minnesota, which, again, I just talked about a little bit ago. It shouldn't have been a loss. That should have been a touchdown catch, and Purdue probably would have ended up winning the game. They do get Rutgers next week, so a fairly interesting game there for Purdue. I don't see them having a whole lot of trouble, but again, I will talk about that more tomorrow. When you look at how they rank in the Big Ten, again, their offense and defense are very similar. They finally get Rondo Moore back on the field. We saw him in the Minnesota game in a losing effort. He was still absolutely fantastic, as was David Bell. And they also started a new quarterback. Jack Plummer came in and started. Sander Horvath didn't really have the best game, but this Purdue team is really good. They played some good football. They played some not great football. But overall, I really do like this Purdue team. They could finish the season 500. The game against Indiana at the end of the season will be very, very interesting. But for right now, Purdue is at number 7 just because of their record. But I mean, the way Purdue is playing, they are playing like a top team in the Big Ten, in my opinion. I really like this team. Moving up a spot, even though they didn't play, are the Maryland Terrapins. They are going to get the Indiana Hoosiers this week. Should be an interesting game. And like I talked about past couple weeks, what drives this team is their offense. Their offense, you look there, 8th in points per game, so not terribly great. But remember, they only scored 3 against Northwestern. And then yards per game, they are 2nd in the Big Ten, only behind the top team in the Big Ten, which we will look at here in a little bit. But it's their defense. Again, much like Minnesota, that needs work. This team relies on their offense, and it's how they've gotten wins. But their defense needs to step up their game. But again, they haven't played the best competition in terms of their wins. They beat Penn State, and they also beat Minnesota while losing in that game to Northwestern. But Northwestern looks like a really, really good team anyway. So, I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of shame here if you are a Maryland fan. Again, you didn't play last week. Hopefully they can get on the field. Again, that defense just got to improve, much like Minnesota. But their record 2-1 is why they are up here at number 6. We have a new team in the top 5, and it is the Iowa Hawkeyes, moving up 1 spot after that win against the Penn State Nittany Lions. They get Nebraska on Black Friday this week, and this is looking like a top 3 or even maybe top 2 team or I should say top 2 defensive team in the Big Ten Conference. You look there, not even allowing 20 points per game, not even allowing 320 yards per game, although very close, and they are 3-2. After dropping their first 2 games of the season, everyone said, yep, Iowa's taking a step back. They came out and they absolutely exploded in their past 3 games, and they have just been phenomenal. The Iowa Hawkeyes absolutely demolished Michigan State, Minnesota, and now Penn State. Nebraska, I don't see them having a huge problem with either. If they can improve in any area, I'd maybe have to say it's Spencer Petras throwing the football a little bit better and finding that number 1 wide receiver target that you can rely on. But their running game has been good. Their defense is forcing turnovers. It's why their team might not have the best yards per game stats, but turnovers give them short fields, and they're able to turn that into points. This Iowa team, I really like this year. I didn't think I was going to like this Iowa team developing a new quarterback, especially with all the offseason stuff that went on. But Iowa finds themselves in the top 5 of the Big Ten. They are the number 5 team with that 3-2 record. Interesting one against Nebraska coming up. The top 4 stay the same. However, there was some shuffling. Wisconsin has fallen to number 4 after that loss against Northwestern. And against that great defense, they just couldn't get anything going. Yes, they've only played 3 games, so the statistics there might be a little bit misleading. But statistically, the best defense in the Big Ten, although that game was a defensive battle. Paul Bunyan's Axe is their next game. They're going to go up against Minnesota. Could be a fairly interesting one there. You got a good defense versus a good offense. And Graham Mertz didn't really play all that well in that Northwestern game. The offense didn't really play all that well, turning the ball over a lot. I believe, again, it was like 4 or 5 turnovers for Wisconsin there. And that defense just couldn't keep Northwestern off the scoreboard as much as they needed to, although this defense is still really good. And this offense is also still really good. I would not look for Wisconsin to hang their head about this loss. I would look for them to get back on track against Minnesota this team is still really talented. It's why they are still up here at number 4, even after losing that game. Indiana also drops a spot to number 3 after that loss against Ohio State. Everyone thought that Ohio State game was over when it was 35-7, but Tom Allen's squad fought back. It was just a lot of missed opportunities for Indiana in this game, especially the mistake with the pick 6. But other than that, Indiana was fantastic in that game on the offensive side. You could work on defense a little bit, which I think is an area that they could work on a little bit, but it was definitely the best defense that Ohio State had faced all year. They get Maryland coming up, which should be a pretty interesting game. 2 really, really good offenses, and I still think this Indiana team is underrated. Even with a top 10 resume and a close win at Ohio State, this team I still feel like is underrated. People keep talking about, well, we don't know how good Indiana is. We don't know how good the Big Ten is. We don't know how good anyone is if that's the case. But Indiana is totally worthy of a top 10 team. If they were to play Ohio State again, they might give Ohio State a better shot, maybe even beat them if Ohio State plays the same game they did. All credit to Indiana. I mean, they are playing really, really well this season. I expect them to finish 7-1 or 6-2. They still have another interesting game coming up here in a couple of weeks, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For right now, Indiana is going to stay put at number 3. Moving up, an undefeated team in the Big Ten. How about the Northwestern Wildcats? This, to me, is the best defense in the Big Ten. I know Wisconsin statistically is, but to me, Northwestern is the best defense in the Big Ten, not even allowing 13 points per game and not even allowing 315 yards per game. This is a really good defensive team. You can improve on the offense a little bit, but you have a lot of good playmakers on that offense, and they get the job done when need be. The win against Wisconsin was huge. It puts them in first place in the Big Ten West and seems to be on a collision course with Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. We'll talk about Ohio State here coming up next, as you know who number 1 is by now. But Northwestern looks really, really good. That Big Ten championship game should be interesting, and they get a fairly easy one this week with the Michigan State Spartans. I don't see them having a whole lot of trouble in this game. Northwestern looks like a top 10 team. They're very, very close to being a top 10 team. I believe they're like number 11. Or something like that. It'll be interesting to see where the playoff committee ranks them tonight. Northwestern, the number 2 team in the Big Ten, which means you know who number 1 is by now. It is still the Ohio State Buckeyes, although that gap might be shrinking. This offense, hands down the best offense in the Big Ten. Even when Justin Fields had a bad day, the worst game of his career, the offense still lit up the scoreboard behind Master Teague, and then Sean Wade had that pick 6. But other than that Sean Wade pick 6, the defense has not played great in the second half of either that Rutgers or that Indiana game. Now, all credit to Indiana in that game. They came back, they fought hard, and they did not let that game go. But Ohio State's defense has just got to play better. We know they're a young defense. We know they lost a lot of talent, especially in that secondary. And with Sean Wade moving to a new position, they are experiencing some struggles. But in order to be more viable for a playoff spot, in my opinion, which I still think they deserve, they are clearly one of the most talented teams in all of football this year. I think they need to get some big wins. A great opportunity coming up here against Illinois, a team that has built a lot of momentum and might not be considered a great team, but definitely a team that is on the rise. Ohio State doesn't have a lot of resume boosters left. As you look, we have Ohio State has Illinois, Michigan State, and Michigan. Sorry, I'm an Ohio State fan. If you couldn't tell around me, that's why I said we. My apologies. But again, not a lot of resume boosters for the Ohio State Buckeyes left. That game against Michigan should be competitive as usual. But other than that, this Indiana win is going to go down as a top 10 win for Ohio State. Penn State win doesn't look great, and you didn't get to play against Maryland. But this team still is, in my opinion, the most talented team in the Big Ten and rightfully deserving of this number 1 spot. All right, that is going to do it for my Big Ten Week 5 power rankings. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like. Also consider subscribing if you are brand new to the channel or you just enjoy my content. Turn that notification bell so you do not miss an upload and you can join Tailgate Nation. Also, leave a comment down below. You can tell me your thoughts on this video and feel free to give me your Big Ten power rankings. Also, share this video with everyone you know. I'm trying to grow the channel as big as possible, so it would mean a lot if you could share this video with everyone you know who likes Big Ten football or just college football in general as much as you and me. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder. I'll see all you guys tomorrow with my week preview. Goodbye.